My husband and his office girlfriend tried to steal my company, so I trapped them with their own plan and exposed everything in front of the whole boardroom. If you looked at my life from the outside, you'd probably think I had it all figured out. My name is Audrey, 36 years old, founder and CEO of a boutique fashion label that recently broke into the international luxury market. I've built everything from scratch: my company, my reputation, my network. People describe me as sharp, independent, someone who doesn't miss a beat. And I like that image. I lived by it. My husband, Kevin, 38, seemed like the perfect complement to that image. He's a financial consultant, well-spoken, charismatic, the kind of man who makes everything look easy. He's the guy who always pulls out the chair for you, remembers your assistant's birthday, and somehow still finds time to run 5 miles before breakfast. We'd been together for over a decade, married for 9 years. I trusted him, not blindly, but deeply. And maybe that was my mistake. I didn't discover the truth through some dramatic moment or explosive confrontation. It was something much smaller, mundane even. One evening, I was at home catching up on supplier invoices for an upcoming launch, while Kevin was out for what he claimed was a client dinner. I needed to send a quick file from my phone to our shared iPad in the living room, the one we mostly use for streaming shows or checking recipes. The airdrop went through as usual, but a second later, a banner popped up on the screen. A message notification. It was from someone named Jay. Still thinking about earlier. Hope you didn't leave a mark this time. I stared at it, not even processing it at first. Then another one followed. Audrey still at work? Should I swing by again tomorrow morning? That was when everything inside me went still. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I unlocked the iPad. It didn't have a passcode. Kevin was never worried about privacy at home. The Messages app was open from earlier. I scrolled up. Jay was Jessica, 28, one of Kevin's junior analysts. I had met her once, twice maybe. Fresh out of business school, bright-eyed, a little overeager. I remember Kevin mentioning her during dinner a few months ago, saying she had potential. Now it seemed like that potential had been thoroughly explored. The messages weren't just flirtatious. They were strategic, discreetly coded, but not enough to go over my head. There were references to transfers, company names, my company names. One thread talked about consolidating independent assets to maximize liquidity. The sinking feeling in my stomach turned to something much colder. This wasn't just an affair, it was a plan. A coordinated, calculated attempt to get their hands on things I had built with my blood and bones. At first, I couldn't breathe. My brain flickered between denial and fury. Was this really happening? Was I actually reading this? I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to my private address. Then I shut the iPad off and sat there for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Maybe I was too angry, or maybe I'd trained myself too well to hold it all in until the timing was right. And when Kevin came home later that night, smelling faintly of wine and lavender, a scent I now recognized wasn't mine, I smiled like nothing had changed. Because that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't going to be the angry wife who flips a table and gives him the upper hand by exposing my pain. No, I was going to play this smart. So I set my own plan in motion. I emailed Jessica 2 days later through my assistant's account, telling her I was looking to bring on a personal finance advisor and had heard great things about her attention to detail. I invited her for a casual coffee meeting, made sure the offer sounded tempting. High pay, flexible hours, close contact with me, the CEO. She said yes, of course. She had no idea I knew. Bringing her into my world wasn't just a move. It was a test. And a trap. Now, every time I see her pretending to be helpful, pretending to admire me, I smile back. I act impressed. I give her little pieces of information she thinks are useful, just enough to keep her confident. But behind the scenes, I'm preparing, watching, rearranging my financial structure, quietly removing his access from every place that matters. Kevin and Jessica think they're playing a long game, but I've already flipped the board. There's something strange about the way the most life-altering moments can slip in so quietly, wrapped in the ordinary. If anyone had asked, I would have said it was just another Thursday, nothing special. But looking back, that evening was when everything started to come into focus. I was hosting a small dinner at our house, mostly out of obligation. Kevin insisted on inviting some colleagues, and among them was Jessica. I remember watching her that night, the way she laughed a little too brightly at Kevin's jokes, her careful glances across the table, always checking his reactions. It was so subtle I almost missed it. But once you start noticing these things, you can't unsee them. After dessert, as I cleared dishes from the dining table, I overheard Jessica's voice floating in from the hallway. She was talking quietly with Kevin, her tone low and urgent. Their conversation was innocent enough on the surface, something about work deadlines and travel plans. But there was a pause, and then a soft, almost imperceptible touch on Kevin's arm as she squeezed past him. For a split second, their eyes met in a way I'd never seen before. Not just colleagues, not just friends. It was such a fleeting thing. Maybe if I had been less tired or more distracted, I would have brushed it off as nothing. But as I stood in the kitchen, suddenly I remembered all the little moments I'd ignored. The way Kevin sometimes shut down his laptop the second I walked in. How he started taking phone calls outside. The late nights that became more frequent without any clear explanation. My mind went back to that strange message notification I'd seen on our iPad just days earlier. The one from Jay. I'd dismissed it at first, assuming it was just work. Now it all snapped into place like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too blind, or maybe too trusting to finish. That was the first time I really looked at Kevin, not as my husband, but as someone with his own hidden corners. Suddenly, I started questioning everything. How long had this been going on? Why Jessica? What did this say about him and about me? I realized with a shock that I'd spent years thinking I understood him. But the man sitting across from me at that dinner table was someone I didn't recognize anymore. In the days that followed, as I watched Kevin and Jessica more closely, I saw it everywhere. The guilt in Kevin's eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. The way Jessica's confidence seemed to waver when she caught me watching her. These weren't just two people caught up in an affair. There were deeper cracks running through both of them, cracks I'd chosen to ignore for too long. For Kevin, I started to see that his betrayal wasn't just about desire or temptation. It was about something broken inside him, something shaped long before he ever met me. I remembered stories he'd told in passing about his parents, the betrayals he witnessed as a boy, how he always seemed to carry a chip on his shoulder when it came to success. For years, I'd mistaken his ambition for confidence, never realizing how much of it was driven by insecurity and the constant need to prove himself. Maybe that's why he clung to Jessica. Someone who looked at him the way he wished I still did. Someone who didn't overshadow him with success he felt he could never match. And Jessica, her ambition was obvious, but I saw now that it was mixed with something more complicated. There was an edge to her that reminded me of myself when I first started out. Hungry, eager, desperate for validation. But she also looked at me with a strange kind of admiration, as if she was trying to decode the secret to being taken seriously. Sometimes I wondered if she really wanted Kevin, or if she just wanted what he represented. A shortcut to a life she thought she deserved. In the middle of all this was Emma, my best friend, quietly observing. She'd been through her own storms and came out the other side softer, wiser. When I finally broke down and told her everything, she listened without judgment, her advice gentle but unwavering. Don't lose yourself, Audrey. No matter how much it hurts, don't let their choices change who you are. Her words echoed in my mind as I lay awake at night, turning over every detail, wondering how I could have missed the signs for so long. It was as if I'd been sleepwalking through my own life, and only now, with the sharp sting of betrayal, was I finally awake. Sometimes seeing the truth means admitting how much you've ignored it. And as I began to unravel the threads of this story, I realized that the real battle wasn't just with Kevin or Jessica, but with the parts of myself that didn't want to see what was right in front of me. Revenge, I learned, isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes it's about patience, a cold, quiet resolve that doesn't waver, even when your heart wants to explode. As soon as I realized how deep Kevin and Jessica's betrayal ran, I decided I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. Instead, I let them think they were winning. Bringing Jessica on as my personal assistant was almost too easy. She tried so hard to impress me, never realizing that every bit of access I gave her was a carefully set trap. I asked her to organize meetings, forward financial documents, and help manage sensitive accounts. Every time she slipped into my office, feigning loyalty, she left behind another digital breadcrumb I could use. She had no idea I was collecting everything: screenshots, emails, voice memos, building a case that would hold up in any courtroom or boardroom. It was hardest to keep my composure in those moments when Jessica tried to bond with me. Sometimes she'd ask about my marriage or my routines, fishing for information. I learned to smile, to laugh at her jokes, to offer just enough trust so she'd drop her guard. Inside, every answer tasted like ash, but I never let it show. I even went out of my way to praise her work, to make her feel valued, so valued that she started slipping, getting careless. Meanwhile, I quietly moved my assets into new accounts, locked down access, and coordinated with my own legal team. I made sure to document everything Kevin did, every unauthorized transfer attempt, every meeting he scheduled off the books. My lawyers, discreet and loyal, helped me draw up contingency plans, ready to strike the moment I said the word. The day I set my trap was the day I finally felt like myself again. I scheduled a board meeting, one that would include key staff, our company's outside legal counsel, Kevin, and Jessica herself. I told everyone it was to discuss a major business partnership. I watched Kevin walk in, confident as ever, and Jessica trailing behind, clutching her laptop and trying to hide her nerves. The room was tense, but I kept my voice steady as I pulled up a file on the main screen. I started with the partnership, slides about the company's future, our values, our trust. Then, slowly, I pivoted. Trust, I said, is everything in business. And in life. I clicked again, and evidence began to appear. Emails, messages, records of unauthorized transactions, even security footage from late-night office visits. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. As I revealed each piece of evidence, I watched the color drain from Kevin's face. Jessica's hands began to tremble. There was nowhere to hide. My lawyers stepped in, presenting the case clearly, professionally, legally. Every step had been checked and double-checked. Every accusation was backed by undeniable proof. The board was silent. Some of our senior staff looked shocked. Others exchanged glances, as if everything suddenly made sense. Kevin tried to protest, his voice shaky, nothing like the man I'd married. Jessica broke down, stammering excuses, but there was no way out. Their plan, so careful and secretive, was now exposed for everyone to see. In one afternoon, Kevin lost not just his position, but his reputation and career. Jessica, too, was escorted from the building by security. They were finished, not because I'd screamed or begged, but because I'd been smarter, more patient, and more ruthless than either of them could ever imagine. Afterward, as I stood in the empty conference room, I felt not triumphant exactly, more like free. I hadn't just taken back control. I'd shown everyone, including myself, that I was stronger than any betrayal. And as the dust settled, I realized that revenge, in the end, wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about reclaiming myself. They say revenge is sweet, but that's not true. In the weeks after that meeting, after the shock, the tears, and the hush that fell over my company, life felt quieter, but not peaceful. My plan had worked flawlessly. Kevin and Jessica were exposed, their ambitions laid bare, their careers in ruins. But as the dust settled, I was left alone with the consequences, and they were nothing like what I had imagined. For Kevin, the fall was swift and brutal. News of the scandal spread fast. Our business community isn't as large as it pretends to be. He lost not only his job, but the network of respect and admiration he'd spent years cultivating. I heard, through mutual friends, that he stopped showing up to social events. When I saw him once by chance, months later, he looked smaller somehow, haunted. I knew he'd grown up watching his father destroy their family with betrayal. Now he was living the same story, and it broke him in ways no one else could see. I don't think it was the loss of money or status that hurt him most. It was the realization that he had become the very thing he once hated. Jessica disappeared even faster. Security escorted her out that day, and she never tried to contact me. At first, I was angry, furious even, that she'd simply vanished, as if her presence in my life had been nothing but a shadow. Later, through an acquaintance, I learned she'd moved back in with her mother. She was reportedly devastated, spiraling into guilt and confusion. For all her bravado, I think she was far less prepared for the consequences than she'd ever let on. Losing her job was just the start. Facing herself was the real punishment. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something like pity. As for me, I thought the moment I exposed them, I'd feel victorious, vindicated. Instead, I was just empty. Revenge hadn't healed me. It had only replaced my anger with a different kind of loneliness. I found myself replaying old memories, wondering how much of my marriage had been real, how many warning signs I'd chosen to ignore. There were days when the pain was so sharp I could barely breathe, nights when sleep refused to come. Eventually, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I started seeing a therapist, an older woman with soft eyes, a gentle voice, and a personal history more tangled than mine. In her office, I finally let myself unravel. She never rushed me, never told me to move on. Instead, she helped me see the difference between justice and healing. Through our conversations, I confronted not just Kevin's betrayal, but the deeper wounds it had uncovered. My fear of not being enough, my own patterns of avoiding hard truths, the part of me that equated being in control with being safe. Still, the healing was slow. I forced myself to step outside my comfort zone, attending workshops and group discussions. I met people who had been unfaithful, people who had been the other woman, people whose stories were so heartbreakingly familiar that for the first time, I saw the human side of betrayal. I listened, I shared, I cried with strangers, and somewhere in the middle of all that honesty, I began to find compassion, not just for others, but for myself. The world didn't magically fix itself. My business survived, though I had to rebuild trust with my team. Friendships shifted, priorities changed. But little by little, I felt lighter. The anger that once drove me began to fade, replaced by something softer, a quiet sense of understanding. Months later, on an ordinary afternoon, I walked into a small cafe and saw Kevin sitting alone at a window seat. Our eyes met for a brief moment. He looked older, more fragile, but somehow at peace. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel a surge of hate or even sadness. I just felt free. I left without saying a word, and as I stepped out into the sunlight, I realized I was finally ready to let go. Revenge is just a way to protect a wounded ego. True healing only comes when you face your fears and learn to forgive. Not for them, but for yourself.